Thanks for taking time out to have a bit of a chat with me. First thing I think everyone's really interested in is what motivated you and why you wanted to make a Shakespeare adaptation.
Well, I think it's always something I've wanted to do. I think Shakespeare is such an important part of everyone's lives. I mean, everyone studies it at school, and there are excellent stories and plays. I just think it's something that might get lost in translation because of the language, and I think my adaptation really brings it to light for so many more people. And I think Romeo and Juliet is that classic love story, and I think everybody knows it, and it's just got so much of everything to it. I think you can do so much with it, and I think that this version really does bring a lot of those things to light.
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on there, so there's a lot sort of in your mind at the time. I think one of the first things I picked up on is you mentioned the Shakespearean language. Obviously, I have seen a very rough edit of a very small section of the film, and that's something that really struck me. So what kind of ways did you go about making sure that the Shakespearean language was understood by a modern audience?
Well, I mean, the kind of between the play and the screenplay, obviously things have been cut out and cut and pasted in different orders, and I think obviously some of the lines have been lost, but the essence of the language still exists within this version of the film. And I think some of the ways that we've kind of moved it into such more of a modern retelling, that the language doesn't really seem so foreign, and I think that when you're watching the film you can really, really understand what's going on by what you're actually seeing, because obviously it is a film and you can do so much with a film, like editing everything together and having things as metaphors for what the language is telling you, and obviously interspersing different Shakespeare plays into the film. And I think that the language moves across so easily into something that we understand. I think after the first 10 minutes you're forgetting that what you're hearing isn't English as we know it now.
Yeah, definitely. One of the sections I have already seen was the opening, the gas station, and I was really struck by the use of the guns in place of swords. Was that something that you were consciously interested in doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a much more familiar kind of motif to have a gun than a sword, and obviously these 20th century kids running around a city with swords is not something that you see now. What they would have would be guns. So having this, but having sword inscribed onto the gun, it makes you understand that these are the kind of the princes of the city, which obviously, and they would be carrying these weapons. And I think it's just something that is so much more familiar now.
Definitely. And sort of that links in with your earlier point that in those initial stages, because what you're presenting is so familiar, the gun violence, the crime, the language doesn't really filter through, because in those kind of stories ordinarily you're often seeing a whole subculture's language use anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
So it kind of transcends it. And yeah, I think it's something that really, like, younger audiences in particular would definitely feel drawn to. Was that conscious too?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think that a lot of young people kind of feel they miss out on the whole essence of Shakespeare because they think, oh, what is this old language, these old stories, these people running around in tights? That isn't what this film is. And I think that connects so much more with a younger person, and they definitely kind of connect more with those characters. I mean, the characters, although they were written 500 years ago, they're still around today, and we're just putting them in a familiar environment for those children to kind of connect with.
So did that have a bearing on your choice of the lead roles?
Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks of the classic, the beautiful Romeo and Juliet. They have to be so full of vigour, and they're young and beautiful. And I think Leonardo DiCaprio, obviously reaching the fame that he's at now, he is the perfect Romeo. I mean, he's everybody's kind of teenage crush. And obviously Claire Danes is such a wonderful, beautiful actress, and I think there was nobody at the time better than her to play the role.
Yeah, she'd already won awards, hadn't she, for her performance in My So-Called Life?
Yeah, My So-Called Life was pretty much her first major role that kind of spun her into the fame that she's at now. I mean, she's not overly familiar, and I think that's one thing that's important about Juliet, because as a character, she's someone who's very shut away, and I think having Claire Danes play her, kind of, it's allowing the world to see her now in one of the most important roles ever.
Yeah, one thing that did strike me, and especially with those two characters, was the actual choice of costumes for the ball at the beginning of the play, and well, the choice of costumes throughout, because Romeo and Juliet do seem slightly different to the other characters. Kind of what sort of thoughts were going on in terms of costume?
Well, I mean, it was kind of like connecting the character to the costume, which I think is something our costume design has done very, very well. And I mean, Romeo is the knight in shining armour at the ball, going to save Juliet from Prince Paris, who is this kind of astronaut dressed as an astronaut, and he's just very typical and quite dumb looking. And obviously you've got this traditional knight in shining armour going to save Juliet, who is the angel in her white wings. And I think they just look absolutely beautiful and just spectacular.
It's really striking imagery. And just one more thing before I go, just talking in terms of the setting. What exactly was going through your mind in terms of relocating the play?
Well, I think one of the, like you said earlier, with the gas station setting, it's just removing, because in the play it's in a marketplace, something that was familiar at that time, and now making it familiar again, just that these people, we know these kind of people, they're walking around our reality, our gas stations, our beaches, our pool rooms. It's all of these things, and I mean, doing it, obviously making it look just something so much more familiar, and with their Hawaiian shirts, and making them look so free, and having them on this abandoned beach with this kind of torn down fairground, it just making it seem so free and easy, and their lives are just so full of fun. And obviously that's something which I think plays into the film as a whole and the story. Traditionally it's this wonderful area, but it's kind of been destroyed a bit, and it's like the story, because we know right from the start that obviously it's not going to be a happy ending, and I think the setting kind of mirrors the story.
And you just couldn't resist including that proscenium arch in all its decay on the beach either. Was that a little final nod to Shakespeare?
Yeah, definitely. And just the kind of the trilogy of these films for my own sake. Just the Red Curtain trilogy of having Strictly Ballroom, and it's all such a stage, and then this, which is a stage, and then my future project, which will also be under the same kind of umbrella of the style of film that I'm making.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure everybody's going to be intrigued and looking forward to that production too. So thank you very much for your time today.
That's all right. Thank you.
Thanks, Baz.